Let's take you back to Zimbabwe, where the lead-up to the election has already been marred by violence after opposition members were attacked at an election rally this past weekend. One person was killed during that attack. The Zimbabwean Electoral Commission has also been accused of rigging the election. Earlier we spoke with former ZANU-PF Cabinet Minister Prof Jonathan Moyo on what he calls the post-colonial Zimbabwe.
One unfortunate but visible consequence of the November 2017 coup has been the depoliticization of the public sphere. Even ZANU-PF itself is not as active as we used to experience it. I suppose it is fair to say this is what one would expect in a military state. People are very afraid, and in fact even the system itself does not want to allow, facilitate, enable or tolerate political activity.
Now you talk about this intolerance, Professor, and some of the allegations that have been labelled certainly against the police or the government, which is an extension of ZANU-PF in many ways, is that Chamisa, for instance, was barred, or his supporters were barred from participating in the election rallies a few days ago. In fact, accusations that many who had stickers stuck on their cars were told to take them down. They couldn't travel any more than 3 people in a vehicle at a time. And also, there's been accusations that a number of Triple C supporters were arrested and beaten by the police.
Yes. Let us remember that these by-elections, I think if it's fair to say all of them, were due 2 years ago, long overdue. They are not being held in accordance with the Constitution. Normally, when a by-election occurs, you'd expect it to be filled, the vacancy, within 90 days or so. But this is, I think, an important background explanation to the current situation, that the authorities did not want the by-elections in the first place. They found every excuse in the book to delay them for nearly 2 years, and they took advantage of the COVID-19.
Talk about the authorities. Pandemic. Who do you speak of? Who are the authorities?
Well, Mnangagwa's government, and Mnangagwa in particular. This is why these by-elections are being seen as a referendum on Mnangagwa. Mnangagwa is afraid of elections, and he has good reasons to be afraid of elections because he's very unpopular with the electorate. So they were using all sorts of tricks, and in fact, it became clear that what they were hoping they would achieve is to keep pushing and pushing the delay until we are within 12 months of the general election. And our constitution says if you are within that period, no by-election would be held. They really did not want the election. So having delayed them unconstitutionally, they are now pulling the usual tricks from their books to frustrate their competition. And their competition is really the same members of parliament they recalled and the councillors of what was then the MDC alliance led by Nelson Chamisa and now Triple C.
Now you talk about tricks that they've been pulling out. The Zimbabwe Electoral Commission has been accused of tampering with the election process, allegations of ghost voters and so on. Is this one of those tricks?
Well, yes. In fact, that is, well, they have 2 tricks. The police in particular, but the securocrats generally, military intelligence, the CIOs or the President's Department on the one hand. So it's a securocratic tool on the one hand, and on the other hand, and that's the hand they really are relying on, it's ZEC. ZEC has done everything it can imagine to avoid fulfilling its constitutional responsibilities as an election body established by the Constitution to conduct elections in an efficient, free, fair, and critically transparent manner. It is as opaque as you can imagine. It refuses to account to the electorate. It refuses to account even to the Constitution. It comes up with all kinds of stories, and in the end, it claims that it is accountable to Parliament. Well, it is accountable to Parliament to report what it has done. But what it is doing, the reason the Constitution enjoins it to be transparent is so that the electorate can hold it accountable. What ZEC is doing, let us call it what it is. It's really to rig the elections. You know, an election is a voter's roll. Incumbents in general in countries like ours manipulate the voter's roll because they know that an election is the voter's roll. Right now, there is quite a serious debate about how people have been moved from the polling stations they know themselves to be registered at, and they used the same stations in 2018 to new ones unknown to the voter. And you have quite some mobility, and yet the affected voters have not changed their addresses, nor have they presented themselves to SEC to change. They have actually moved voters from ZANU-PF stronghold to constituencies or wards they think are opposition strongholds to try and dilute the numbers there and so forth. So it is quite a serious situation in Zimbabwe in terms of the behavior of the electoral body.
Professor, my final question is around Excelgate, how Zimbabwe's 2018 presidential election was stolen. Now, you obviously, from that title, make allegations that that election was stolen. Who was it stolen from, and what was the process behind, or how did they steal that election?
ZEC is required by law to submit a report to Parliament. And the rigging, which is the theft of the 2018 presidential election, the evidence of that is contained in ZEC's report. They cut corners. They discovered from the polling station results, which were 10,985 polling stations, that Mnangagwa has lost. And they got scared that if they allow the transmission of the results to follow what is prescribed by the law, the Mnangagwa's defeat will become apparent to everyone. So they quickly diverted the presidential ballot papers from the ward to the National Command Center. And when they got to the National Command Center, they turned the National Command Center, which by law is the last one that receives the results that would have already been processed. They turned that National Command Center in Harare into a giant polling station and started afresh to fill. They had 20 or so people, security people, literally filling in new V11s to create a new result, which they changed 3 times, even at that, all the opportunity. So how did they steal the elections? They stole the elections by inventing a new route for transmitting the results and collecting the results only for the presidential elections, and the changing of the result of the presidential election happened in Harare